Right now, you're looking at two examples of the same video. Which one do you find more pleasant to watch? I would guess you prefer the one on the right. Am I right? I think you already figured out that the only difference between these two videos is color grading. But what if I told you that for the most part, color in the frame determines whether people will watch your videos or not? And what if I told you that the colors in your frame directly influence how many views your video will get? This isn't a myth or a made-up theory, it's just color, and it affects how people perceive your videos. And if color grading has such a huge impact, then you definitely need to know how to get great colors in your videos. In this video, I'll show you how to achieve high-quality color grading and teach you everything about color that you didn't know about before or maybe never even considered, so you can make your videos more visually appealing. To start, let's take a look at color models. Color models define how colors are encoded and displayed in the digital world. Different models are used depending on the task, and each has its own unique features. I'm gonna break down the three main ones: RGB, HSL, and LEB. RGB is primary model used in monitors, TVs, cameras, and all digital displays. It's based on the principle of additive color mixing. The more light you add, the brighter the color becomes. Imagine a black screen. If you add red, it lights up red. Add green and you'll get yellow. Add blue and all three colors mix to create white. This is exactly how screens work. They simply turn different colored pixels on or off to create an image. With RGB, you can mix these three colors in different proportions to create any shade. You've probably seen these three values before. Well, depending on what numbers you enter, you'll get different colors. RGB is great for working with videos and images, but it has one downside. It doesn't always match how the human eye perceives color. For example, pure blue appears darker than pure yellow, even though they have the same brightness in a digital representation. Now, let's talk about HSL. Imagine you want to change an object's color, but keep its brightness and saturation the same. In RGB, this is tricky because colors depend on each other. But HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, is designed for exactly this purpose. HSL describes color with three parameters. Hue, the actual color, is measured in degrees from 0 degrees to 360 degrees. 0 degrees is red, 120 degrees is green, 240 degrees is blue, and so on. Saturation, how pure or muted the color is. At 0% saturation, the color turns gray. Lightness, how dark or bright the color is. 0% is black, 100% is white, and 50% is the mid-tone. HSL is useful in design and color correction because you can adjust just one parameter without affecting the others. For example, you can shift the hue to turn blue into green while keeping the same brightness. RGB and HSL are device dependent, meaning the colors you see on the screen may look different on another or when printed. But there's a color model that's independent of devices. LEB. LEB is designed to match how humans actually perceive color. It has three components. L, lightness, the brightness of the color, ranging from 0, black, to 100, white. A, the excess from green to red. B, the excess from blue to yellow. What makes LEB interesting is that it can be used for perfect color correction. For example, in Photoshop, you can make skin tones look more natural without affecting lighting, or you can adjust colors without losing details, something that often causes issues in RGB. So, which model should you use? RGB is ideal for working with videos and images on screens. HSL is great for editing colors, especially in design. LEB is the best choice for professional color correction. Since we are talking about video color correction, my choice is RGB. A quick note about white balance. White balance is one of the key settings for adjusting color. It determines the tone of white in your footage. But this isn't the same as tint, which I'll discuss later. It's about making your image look warmer, more yellow, or cooler, more blue. Ideally, you want to adjust it so that white appears as true white, without any unwanted color tints. This setting is pretty simple to use, and there's one basic rule. If your image looks too yellow, make the value negative. If your image looks too blue, make the value positive. It's an easy fix. You can clearly see the difference between blue and yellow. You can also use an auto white balance tool with an eyedropper, Click on the eyedropper, select the whitest part of your video, and it will automatically adjust the balance. However, this feature isn't always 100% accurate, so I recommend adjusting it manually. This way you'll understand how it works and fine-tune it exactly how you want. Now, it's important to talk about where and how to do color grading. For this, I can highlight several programs and tools. Let's start with the programs. Of course, I recommend using DaVinci Resolve for color grading because this is where you have a huge number of features and options that will help you adjust colors down to the finest details. However, since I started and continue to work in After Effects and Premiere Pro, I would advise you to use the Lumetri Color effect in these programs. It will give you a basic and few additional settings that will definitely be enough for quality color grading. As far as I know, in Final Cut Pro, the adjustment is a bit more complex and requires adding several effects, but it doesn't change the essence. It absolutely doesn't matter which program you're using. What's important is the knowledge you have to adjust colors correctly. You can do color grading even in CapCut and achieve high quality, or you can work in DaVinci and make the colors terrible. What matters is not which tools you use, but the knowledge you apply in your work. Therefore, it's crucial not to fixate on equipment or software, but to use what you have. Focus on information and consume as much as you can, delving deeply into the field in which you wanna develop. Before you start doing color grading, you need to ensure that your monitor is correctly set up. For this, you need to calibrate your monitor. The easiest way for Windows is to search for Calibrate Display Color in the search bar and go through all steps in that test, where you can fine-tune the colors and contrast on your monitor. I haven't worked on macOS, so I can provide guidance there, but I'm sure you can find a way to set up the monitor similarly. You may search in the settings or check on YouTube. Additionally, you need to adjust the monitor itself, not just in the system. Depending on which monitor you have, you need to find videos on YouTube that specifically address setting up your monitor. If such a video doesn't exist or you don't like the colors after adjusting, you will have to configure it yourself. In fact, you need to make the colors look natural. For example, you need to adjust the RGB so that it's not obvious that one of the three colors stands out more than the others. In other words, there shouldn't be a dominant red, blue, or green hue. If one is noticeable, you need to decrease that color if everything is set to 100, or increase the others if all your parameters are slightly below 100. To avoid talking too much about monitor setup, I'll show you my settings instead. You can copy and edit them if your colors are displayed poorly. A few more tips. Don't make the saturation and contrast too high. Doing so can significantly distort the actual color and light rendering. After a bit of theory and monitor calibration, we can move on to the basic color correction. First, I will show you the tools and explain what they are for, and then I will demonstrate my process so you can see what I do and how it affects the results. First is white balance. As I mentioned, you can adjust the white balance using the eyedropper tool. This way you can set the temperature, which is the theory I told you about, but there is also a green and magenta tint that can be adjusted automatically. I would recommend setting this manually. The next adjustment is saturation. You can adjust it here if you want to do only basic color correction, but if you are aiming for quality, it's better not to adjust it now. I'll show you a method and settings that will allow you to adjust saturation more precisely later. The exposure parameter generally makes everything brighter. I wouldn't set its value above 1. Usually my exposure is around 0.3 to 0.5. Contrast makes the image sharper by making the bright areas brighter and dark areas darker. I set the maximum value to 50. Sometimes you can make it negative, but that's very rare. Highlights make bright areas lighter or darker. Shadows do the same but for shadow areas. I try not to touch white and black, but as I mentioned in my video about making videos look expensive, sometimes the white can be too bright and the black can be too dark. So to achieve a slight balance, you can lower whites a bit and raise blacks. If you are wondering why you can lower highlights, I'll explain that these are two different parameters. You don't need to raise highlights, but this makes the bright areas too bright, so you'll need to adjust whites accordingly. I think you've often seen in films that white looks gray. This is done through the whites parameter to ensure that white isn't too bright, that it draws all the attention. I've covered basic correction, now it's time to talk about advanced color correction. Faded fill makes the image less contrasty. If you raise it a bit, the video can look cinematic. Honestly, this parameter is not really necessary, only in the rarest cases. Sharpen makes the video clearer, or it's blur if you set the parameter to a negative value. Now, let me explain why we didn't adjust saturation in the first block. Because here, there are two parameters that control the saturation of the video. If you don't want to fuss too much over this, you could just adjust saturation, but I will tell you about more detailed settings. Saturation is the overall saturation of the colors. If you max it out, the image will look toxic. If you remove it, it will become black and white. Vibrance is smart saturation. It boosts dull colors but barely touches already bright ones, so the image doesn't become overly vivid. Essentially, saturation is a coarse adjustment, while vibrance is more refined, keeping the colors natural. So you can lower saturation a bit and then add vibrance to balance the color saturation. Just play around with the values to understand how these parameters work. Now you can adjust the curves. Essentially, this is the same as contrast, but an extended version. The top point makes the bright areas lighter or darker, while the bottom point does the same for dark areas. You can adjust each color separately here, but it's not necessary for most people. Let me show you how to universally adjust curves so the video looks cinematic. To make it clearly, I'll explain in simple terms how to set it. Lower the upper point a bit and raise the lower point. Then, in those areas, hold the left mouse button and pull a bit up in the upper part and a little down in the lower part. Next is color wheels. These sliders control brightness, while these circles control the hue of highlights, midtones, and shadows. If your image still has a yellowish tint, you can slightly shift towards blue. This way you'll balance the color. You can also apply a few effects related to color grading, such as levels, vignette, noise, grain, and similar tweaks that influence the perception of the video. After manual color correction, we can also talk about automated adjustments. The simplest way is to use LUTs. A LUT, lookup table, is essentially a ready-mode color grading preset that allows you to apply specific settings to a video or image with one click. It significantly helps speed up the color adjustments process in videos. If you frequently edit videos with the same color and lighting setup, you can use a LUT. If that's not the case, it's better to adjust manually. You can try the different LUT presets and see the results, but I don't think there are universal presets that work for everyone. However, if you want to try using them, don't use the default LUTs provided in the programs. They are often poorly calibrated, making the video look terrible. And if you really want to achieve a great result for specific tasks, you may want to check out my LUT pack. I created presets that could fit well into your work. The link to the LUT pack is in the description. That was the theory, and now, as promised, I will show you my complete color grading process so you can understand how to do it and be able to replicate it. I discussed quite frequent mistakes in video about making videos look expensive. There's a lot of theoretical background that will give you insight into what truly affects video quality and what is a misconception. I hope you succeed, and I've given you at least some understanding of how to set your colors to look professional. Subscribe if you want more videos where I delve deeper into video editing, and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, don't forget about the description, and see you soon.